Thank you all for coming. It's my pleasure to introduce Liz Pearle. Oh, my name is Ann Farmer, and I'm a technical writer in software engineering. I always forget that part. Ms. Pearle is a graduate of Yale University, and she worked as an editor and publisher for more than 20 years. She was vice president and publisher of several of the nation's most prestigious publishing houses, including William Morrow, Avon Books, Addison Wesley, Prentice Hall Press. She was also an associate publisher of Bantam Books. She is currently the editor-in-chief of the nonprofit organization Common Sense Media. Common Sense Media is the nation's leading nonpartisan organization designed to help families make informed choices, media choices for their children. Ms. Pearle is the author of When Work Doesn't Work Anymore, and she's here to talk with us about her new book, Money, a Memoir, Women, Emotions, and Cash. Please welcome Ms. Pearle.
Thanks for being inside on this beautiful day. It's great to be here. I'm still in Google shock. I don't know how long it takes for this to wear off. You are probably still in it if you're working here. What an amazing place, and it's a real honor to be here. As you heard from my resume, which I haven't actually heard in a while because I haven't applied for a job in a while, I've been in business for a long, long time. And I've published a lot of the people who have come and spoken here recently. So when I decided to switch sides of the fence, it was probably idiocy, but I did it anyway. And it was about following a passion and not thinking about money and not worrying about anything. And I did this in part because I had a partner who I looked to for a cash flow, among other things. And this book came out of an experience that relates to that, which is said partner being my husband. I looked for him a long time. You know, when you're successful in business as a woman, they call you aggressive and tough and all these other things. So that's the reason you're convinced that you're never going to get anyone to marry you, because that's what the culture tells you. I was the kind of person who put makeup on to go to the dry cleaner, you know, in case I would meet him there. Didn't work. I know. And, but maybe, you know, long story short, I found he who would be solvent. I actually married the first man who owned a suit. I had dated, you know, actor, writers, waiters, actor, waiter, writers, musician, waiter, writers, waiter, waiters. And, you know, here was this man who, by the look of his shoes, had a bi-monthly paycheck. So that made him a top candidate right then and there. And I say this as a dyed-in-the-wool, the F word, feminist. I am absolutely hardcore on all of this stuff, and indeed all the books I write and everything I do is to help women. Sorry, guys, you're on your own. So I say all this stuff, embarrassing and as politically incorrect as it is, because if I feel it's important, and this is why I wrote the book, to fess up to women's bizarre, twisted, emotional relationship to money. Now, I'm not saying that men don't have that either, but we'll get to you later. So anyway, I'll go back. I married this man. He was a big, strong, actually, I met him and he was talking about going to jail. And I thought, oh, an insider trader. He must be on Wall Street. I thought, at least he's got a job. And it turns out it was for perjury, but he was in advertising and he was bribing somebody. But long story short, I did marry him, and he did get off. He didn't go to jail. I don't know if he was guilty. I didn't ask. Libby, he's guilty. So I married this lovely man. I proceeded to have a child. I have had this huge career. And one day, because I have an alternate income in the house, I decide that I have the luxury of having principles all of a sudden. And I walk out of my job and become a writer. And if you ever want to really go broke very quickly, I recommend that path. It's even less remunerative than waiting on tables. So I became a writer and wrote this book called When Work Doesn't Work Anymore, about identity in women and what happens when we have jobs we love that define us, and then we walk out of the jobs we love that define us, and we leave our definition and identity in the elevator, and we go, oh, now who am I? So I wrote this book, and my husband gets transferred to Singapore, and in Singapore I can't work because I'm the accessory. So off I go to Singapore with a 3-year-old son. My husband had moved there 6 months ahead of me because I had to stay behind and do some book publicity for my first book. And I get there and he said, I don't want to be married anymore. Go home. And I said, home? Didn't we just sell that? Everything we own is in a steamer on its way through the Suez, and what do you mean go home? And what do you mean, don't you want to work on the marriage? And he said, no, no, I really don't, goodbye. And after about 5 weeks of groveling, I realized he probably was sticking to his point, and I got on a plane with my 3-year-old, who a 4-year-old at this point, for San Francisco, because I had nowhere to go. My best friend had room. And as I was at the airport, he peeled off a few bills, stuffed them in my hand, I stuffed them in my pocket, I got on the plane, and somewhere over Guam, I thought, ooh, I better count my money. And I had 1,500 bucks. So I had gone from being an independent woman who had worked her whole life, who had savings, who had assets, who had willingly handed everything over to my husband because that was how he was going to show his love for me, by taking care of me, even though I was making the money. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't mind. Look, I will confess to you, the last time I balanced a checkbook was 1978. As far as I'm concerned, that's why they created the ATM. I can find out how much money I have just by rolling up to the ATM and punching in a PIN number, and it's like, okay, go, you can go to the shopping, you can do whatever you need to do. So I don't like facing money. To me, it feels like I'm very alone, and it's not that I don't trust myself. I've run major corporations. I'm pretty good with money, but I'm very paradoxical about it, and I come from a culture that has really allowed me to be infantilized, where the boys, to this day, if a boy has a lawn mowing job, we say, oh, aren't you enterprising? And if a girl is babysitting, we tell her she's very good with kids. Two very different value systems about money, and we carry this forward, and this is how they create those every kiss begins with K ads. Don't you love those with the little girl sitting there, the babysitter's next to her? And she goes, oh, Susie, I think Brian likes you. And she goes, oh, I know. And she whips out the diamond. This is what the culture continues to tell us. So here I am, product of the culture. I meet Mr. Not Really a Criminal, married man, and marry him, turn everything over to him, marry me, manage my money, and I end up on my friend's sofa with $1,500 in cash. So this was sort of my wake-up call, and I thought, boy, if this can happen to me, I'm a pretty savvy citizen. This could happen to other people. And as a publisher, I never trust myself. I go out and talk to people. So I started to talk to people, and I listened, and I talked, and I listened, and I listened, and I listened, and I kept traveling across the country, and I started amassing these incredible stories of women and money, and what happens when emotional conditions create financial ones. I also, as a publisher, know that, here's the dirty little secret, I have a diet book for every zip code in the country. They all contain exactly the same information. Eat less, move more. Doesn't matter whether you do it in Sonoma or South Beach, same information. The same is true for personal finance books. Save more, spend less. Pay attention to your finances. There is a lot of wisdom in those three things, but there are more women out there who are not paying attention to that than who are, as evidenced by the fact that we've had negative savings for the last, I think it's 22 months now. The only time this was true was the Great Depression. We outspend, well, we just saw what happened in the stock market, in Shanghai. This is what's happening. We are outspending, we are not saving, we are not taking care of ourselves, and the people who end up paying for this are women. Now, this is a cultural thing, and it is, I hope, changing. This is one of the youngest groups of people I've talked to in a while, so I really look forward to hearing about whether this is ringing true for you or not, because when I was talking the other day in Minneapolis to a group of women, it was like, bobbleheads, because I told this story. When I was 9, I'll save you all the math, I'm about to be 51. When I was 9, my mother died the year before. I was with my grandmother, and she was rifling through her drawers, and gloves came out, and there's this weird sort of sanitary napkin thing that you used to use in the 60s that was like a torture device. Monty Python, I think, used it in a movie. And she was pulling out all this weird stuff, and then she pulls out this little thing. And I said, what is that? And she opened it up, and she went to her bag, and she put a $20 bill in it, and closed it up. And this is literally a pin, and it's pin money. This is what, ouch, oops, this is what it comes in, pin money. This is, she said, the only Yiddish word I ever heard her use. She said, this is the beginning of your knipple. Which didn't sound good, especially when paired with the sanitary napkin thing. She said, this is the beginning of your knipple. It's a woman's private stash. Everybody needs one. This was my financial education. No one said anything to me for 30 more years until I ended up with $1,500 and all my assets being managed from a man who had just told me to get lost in Singapore. The culture conspires. You know, women are valued for such a broad range of things. You know, our looks, our brains, our resumes, our ability to earn money, our homes. You know, we've got a very long thing. But if you ask women and you look at the studies about how they value themselves, it's in what we contribute to other people. We're very indirect about wanting things for ourselves. We do not say we are materialistic beings. We say we are caring beings. There's 3 million years of brain chemistry behind this. I won't go into that. You should have my friend Luann Brizendine here who talks about the female brain, because she'll tell you all about that. But there are real biological and wiring and cultural issues conspiring for women to behave as stupidly as I did about my finances. And it's interesting because women don't take control of their lives for very emotional reasons. How many of you, well, you all work at Google, so it doesn't count, but how many of you have a 401k? How many of you had one before you came to Google? Wow. Okay, it's a generational change. I asked that question with women in their 50s, and it doesn't happen. You know, at what age were you when you first opened a 401k and people are already behind the curve with taking care of themselves? Because there is this weird thing that someone's going to bail them out. That someone or something that's going to bail them out is a husband, a father, a job, or I cannot tell you how many people have a novel in their drawers that is going to be the next big best-selling novel out there that's going to release them from having to worry about their money. You know, when I started in publishing, my first salary was $6,500 a year. I think that's below the poverty line now. But I never negotiated it. And there is a reason for that. When you look at, Carnegie Mellon just came out with all this research about salary negotiations. When you ask a man what a salary negotiation feels like, and you ask him to choose from a list of descriptors, he says going to a ball game. When you ask a woman what a salary negotiation feels like, an overwhelming majority of women picked going to the dentist. Ball game dentist. A little bit of a difference there. And how does this show up? The average gap in salary between what a woman will leave on the table versus a man for failing to negotiate that salary over the course of a lifetime is $500,000. This is a significant amount of money. Why don't women? I went into these jobs. I knew people. Matthew next to me was making $20,000 more for the same product manager job that I was doing. Why didn't I speak up? Well, when I ask women this question, 3 reasons. I don't want them to think I'm that kind of person. I won't get the job, or they won't promote me. Or here's my personal favorite, of which I am completely guilty. I'll get in there and I'll do such a good job, then they'll pay me more. For any of us who have lived in the land of the 3% merit raise, we know how true that isn't. This is the kind of place where a woman's reluctance to look at herself starkly, baldly, as a financial entity can really hurt us economically in the long run. So I went through work. I was so happy to trade recognition for money. Give me praise, I'll figure out the money later. It's like I didn't put the financial piece in the center of my life. And this is overwhelmingly true. In UC Irvine, they just did a study where they gave men and women a salary who were not entry level. And the women got it up to from $60,000 to $63,000, and the men from $60,000 to $68,000. And when they asked why, the men said, "What do we have to lose?" And they asked the women, "What do you have to lose?" And they said, "Everything." When you ask a man, what is money? A river or a puddle? Money is a river. It's constantly replenishing. If you ask a woman, the overwhelming number of women polled in this country still fear being bag ladies. They still fear that everything is going to be taken away from them. And there's a reason for this. 87% of the impoverished elderly are women. We die much later than the men in our lives. We die without resources. Yet, paradoxically, we're going to inherit more money in the next generation. You guys are going to inherit much more money in the next generation than ever before, and it's predominantly going to women. This is why you see people educating women about finance all the time now, but it's not making much headway. So why? Because fundamentally, people are a lot like me. I have this weird feminine thing where I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to face it, and I don't want to own it. Because when I was interviewing somebody, I said, what is that about? I'm so embarrassed. I'm so mortified. I don't mind making it. I just don't want to deal with it. She said, money is power. And I thought, oh, get out the Birkenstocks. We're back in the 70s, you know. And I said, crunch, crunch, what do you mean money is power? And she said, money is power. And I thought about it, and it is a power relationship. With my first husband, when I turned all the money over to him, what was I saying? You have the power. You have the power in this relationship. I really know I have the power, which is the other thing women say. It's like, so quietly, I really know that I can take care of this myself, but I want him to feel that he can do it because I don't want to deal with it, and it's serving me. And we have a culture full of these celebutantes who reinforce this kind of image for our children all the time. All the time. You look at Paris Hilton, you look at all these girls with the money that comes from nowhere, and they're not talking about saving or doing anything responsible. They're talking about traditional feminine sort of roles where, let me tell you, you know, this is not a good financial plan, but I digress. So anyway, I got divorced, I come back here, and I realized that I've made a big mistake in turning all my money over. But I did have a knipple. I had saved a little money that my husband never knew about, and I started my life over, and I was in a support group because now I'm in California and everything has a support group. And I was with these very well-to-do, sort of very supported people, and talking about, oh, how am I going to live? I don't have any money, and I was whining about my kid. You know, I'm not going to be able to give him school. And she said, one woman said, oh, bullshit, you want the money for yourself. You're hiding behind your kid. And this was another sort of wake-up call for me, because everything I do for my family, right? I buy a sofa for my family. My family does not want a new sofa. I want to buy a new sofa. But anyway, I do. I bought a new rug because the family room needed a new rug. My husband went, the family room does not need a new rug. So, but anyway, we'll get to that story in a minute. But so I'm in this support group, and this woman said, you know, you are so full of it because you really want this money, and you're just afraid to admit it yourself. And I thought, you know, first of all, thanks for taking my clothes off in public. I felt completely naked. And second of all, I thought that's absolutely true, and how humiliating. How humiliating to absolutely admit that money matters to me. Because I had this false notion that I would never have to admit that. It was crass, it was crude. I was told you never talk about, the other piece of financial information from my grandmother was when I asked her, Nana, are we rich or poor? She said, oh, we never talk about money. It's rude, you know. You just didn't talk about money. So I took this information in from the support group, and I went and I negotiated my divorce settlement with my husband as a financial settlement, not the way my friend Lisa did, who tried to use the divorce to rake him over the coals for revenge, or not the way another woman I interviewed who, when she called me up and said, what do I do, what do I do? I don't know, you know, how to structure payments. And I said, well, you know, how much do you need every month? She goes, I can't tell you. I said, you can't tell me because you don't know? Or because you're embarrassed? She goes, oh, I know what I spend and I'm embarrassed. I can't tell you. So she gets divorced. She calls me 3 months later as part of a follow-up interview. She said, I can't live on my settlement. I said, well, why didn't you stick up for what you needed? She said, I didn't want him to be mad at me. He was leaving her. You didn't want him to be mad at you, you know, these kind of emotional things. I instead now, because I was sort of honest about the fact that money was going to matter, not just to my son but to me, sat down and created a dialogue with my soon-to-be ex-husband that has turned into the platform of a very good friendship. Oddly, we are very good friends today. Thank God he ditched me because he was a pain in the ass. But it really, we had an unloaded conversation, and it could have gone off the rails and created a very different relationship with him that would have affected my child and myself and my own empowerment with money for years to come. So here I am at a reduced income level and realizing that I was okay. I got my assets together. We had our divorce. We moved along. Now I had to decide what kind of life I wanted. I wanted to be, I always have to work, and that's just who I am. And will always be that way, A, because I need to, but B, because I want to. And I design a work life and go back into my old profession of publishing and find that because I'm working 30 hours instead of 60 hours a week, I'm the subject of a lot of resentment because I have placed a value on my time and taken a pay cut because I valued my time as much as my money. This I refer to as ego side because you end up taking a much lower job than you would have in your previous life or in your previous empowerment. And any woman here or any man who wants to spend a lot of time with their children, once you have children and you don't work in an amazing place like Google that lets you bring them, you have very difficult choices to make between money and relationship. And this is something that I faced head on with this and really had a tough time. I ended up leaving this publishing company where I was working because people were suspicious of this salary. They didn't understand why I would live at a reduced level because I wanted to have this family life. And I couldn't communicate in a culture that still values how much time you put in on the job, how much money you make from the job. These are traditionally male ways of valuing yourself. In men, men have traditionally valued themselves and are valued in this society by how much money they make and what position they hold. You guys are in a different kind of culture, but most hierarchical cultures, that is absolutely the case. And a man will be valued by society that way. It is unfair. I have a son. I don't want him valued that way, but it's true. So when you go into a culture that values time and money, and you end up valuing yourself by it, if you cut yourself out of that equation, there's going to be a disruption in the force. And you've got to be very financially clear and emotionally clear and divorce who you are as a person from who you are as a salary as you go into a situation like this. I had planned never to get married again because I thought my picker is broken, I'm terrible, but the online world being what it was, one day I'm online and my friend Carol says, go on Match.com. And I thought, oh yeah, right, I'm not that desperate. And she said, oh, just try it, it's free. Magic words. I'm the person who will lie about the price of a lipstick because I don't want you to know I spent $20 on basically beeswax with red food coloring. And I go on Match.com and I'm going through and I thought, oh, that's not bad. Ooh, he's kind of cute. He looked like Dustin Hoffman. And I'm reading through his little thing. And then there are the trick questions like, what kind of car do you drive? And I thought, now we're getting to the brass tacks. Beater, Maserati, SUV, none of your damn business. And he'd clicked none of your damn business. I thought, oh God, he's poor as a church mouse. And he was. Matter of fact, it wasn't even his car, it was his ex-girlfriend's. But anyway. So we start corresponding and one thing leads to another and little did I know, but he was my soulmate. And all of a sudden, I am now in the position of facing something that a third of all women in this country face who get married. I am now making a lot more money than my husband. And I'm coming into the marriage with money. And the first thing somebody tells me is, you gotta sign a prenup. And I thought, that's the least romantic thing I've ever heard of. He's gonna run for the hills. That's it. It took me a long time to find this one. He doesn't look like he's an axe murderer, and I would like to marry him. And a prenup should probably just queer the whole deal. So tentatively, I bring it up and wait for, the door to slam. And he said, what a good idea. And I thought, whoa, you are enlightened. I'll marry you. So because he said, a marriage is a contract. It's a financial contract. It's a social contract. It's an emotional contract. It's a spiritual contract. But it's also a financial contract. So I do a prenup. That sounds pretty good. But then we face putting our money together. We have 2 kids now. He comes with one, I come with one. That went a lot easier than the money, let me tell you. We put the money together. And there are big differences in the way men approach money and women approach money. And here's a classic example. He said to me, one day, well, actually the phone rang and the girlfriend's car had died with our children in it, which was bad. You should not have a car on San Francisco hills that's dead with children who are alive. And he said, I think I'm going to need a new car. And I said, okay. He said, well, I'm going to go look. I said, all right. And I'm sitting at my desk typing, and I'm working on a book, and up drives a new car. And I made a sound that I think only the dogs in the neighborhood could hear because it was so high-pitched. And I came downstairs, I said, I thought you were going to look. And he said, well, I told you I was going to get a car. He thought we'd had the conversation. I'm going to look for a car means I'm going to buy a new car. I am the kind of person who has been trying to buy a new washing machine for 4 years. I will talk this purchase to death. Can we get a front loader? Can it be this? But it's $700, and we'll think of what we could do with it. He's like, buy the damn machine. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I still haven't bought it. But, because I won't commit myself, because it's money I'm taking out of my children's mouth. You want to ask, how I feel about that one. There's a new rug that I fall in love with. Well, it's for my children. But that's that whole feminine woman's think again about the money thing. So now we're in this position where we have to negotiate and reframe a financial relationship that's based on things that aren't money. And let me tell you, when I talked to 1,000 women in Las Vegas a couple weeks ago, this was a pretty high-powered group of people. They were all corporate treasurers, which I realized because they all had big shoulder pads and bows. I swear that's back. I don't know where this came from. But I was talking to these women, and I sort of was realizing that they were in another space, and I stopped and I said, how many of you make more money than your husbands? And all their hands went up. And I said, how many of your mothers made more money than your fathers? Maybe 2 or 3 hands went up. And I said, how many of you know what you're doing? And everybody laughed because this is new territory. You guys are in new territory. You're working for a company that's going to give you assets, that's going to give you benefits, that's going to take care of you. And that's a great start, but unless we internalize this, not in just straight fact that money may be power, it may be all these other things, but you know what money is? Money is important. And it doesn't, taking care of yourself financially does not mean that no one else will ever love you. It just means that you've taken care of yourself financially. And most of America is not doing this. And most of American women are still not doing this. And I cannot tell you, when I talked at Stanford Business School the other day, I asked how many women at this lunch, brown bag lunch, thought they were still going to be working in 10 years, and 1/3 of the hands went up. And 2/3 of them thought that they would be at home with their children. And that's fine, but they better save. And they better understand what their financial requirements are. And they better know that they've got to say whether they're making the money or not in what the relationship is financially there. Because they could end up on their friend's couch with $1,500 and a secret stash that her ex-husband didn't know about, the way I did. And that's really why I wrote this book, because I have a son and a daughter. And I don't want my son to go out there thinking that his value in life is going to come from his earning capacity. And I don't want my daughter to think her value in life is to attract someone who earns a good salary and who will take care of you. I want to, money is a proxy in this culture. We use it for revenge, for envy, we use it for love, we use it for care, we use it for security. But unless we're really clear about it and really honest, we're going to not have a clear relationship and not be able to take care of ourselves. I can laugh about the fact that I go out to dinner with my husband and he snaps down the credit card and I know the bill's coming back to me. I like that feeling of being taken care of. But I also know that bill's coming back to me. I love my husband. I have married the greatest guy on the planet. If his salary were a light bulb, you could not read by it. He is a journalist. So I have learned to value, and it's been great for me, to be conscious of the role that money plays in making my choices. When I interviewed a couple of women coming out of college, one told me a story of how she had fallen in love with a guy and she felt so safe with him and wonderful. And it didn't really occur to her that the fact that he had a good suit and had gone to law school was playing into the attraction. And when it turns out this boy had a rather abusive mother who, of course, this girl was not good enough for. And after she gave up her rent-controlled apartment and gave up her job and moved across the country to move in with this guy, only to be sort of hounded out of Dodge by the abusive mother and having to start all over again from scratch with no more rent-controlled apartment. You know, only then did she realize that, you know, what was attracting her was in part his financial security. There is nothing wrong with that, just know it's on the radar. And that's really why I wrote this book, why I did it with women's stories, because I listen to other women when they tell me their stories. And women did things with money that I never imagined. I learned so much, you know, but we're smart people, but we aren't raised in a way to really pay attention to what emotions we're loading on cash. So I hope that if you do read this book, it'll help you do what many women have said after they read it, which is go, that's me, that's me, that's me. I'm a little embarrassed that I do that, but I don't want that to, a lack of awareness to drive choices. I don't want emotional needs to create financial conditions, because we're all lucky enough to be working. We're all lucky enough to use our brains to be well remunerated, but we also have to really be conscious that money is just money. Nothing more and nothing less. And it's a tool. And as I tell my kids, and then they roll their eyes, you know, happiness is really wanting what you have, not having what you want. And I just like, oh, Mom, go away. But a secure financial life is every woman's right. But it's also every woman's responsibility. So thank you for listening to me today as I honk with this cold. And I'd be happy to hear from you guys, because you're actually a new audience for me. Thanks.
I have a funny story to share with you. My mother recently came to stay with me for a couple of weeks, and she was giving me $2,000 in an envelope, just cash. And I said, oh, what's this? She said, I was secretly saving this from your father so he wouldn't know. And she said, you need to do the same thing. Just like open up your own account. You know, it's good to have a joint account, but you should have your own account, because you never know. And so it's funny, I put this money in my jean pocket and I left it somewhere. And I told my husband, oh my God, I left my jacket somewhere. And so he got curious. He found the money in the pocket. And he said, oh, what's this? And I said, oh, my mother, you know, I had to make up a story. And my mom's like, I'll give it to you at another time. But I feel like, you know, it's not really my money. It's my mother's money. But the fact that she was thinking of, you know, I need to do this secretly, you know, and teaching me that this is what I need to do too. So now I'm thinking, how am I going to open up another account without my husband knowing? I feel like it's a very guilty feeling. You know, I should be able to save with my husband. And because we have a small child. So now I'm like, oh my God, finances are so important. They always, you know, should be. But I'm thinking, do I need to, you know, be sneaky and do this behind my husband's back? I mean, what if he finds out, you know? And it's just, it's a scary thought, but it's also, I still think about it, thinking that maybe this is the way we could save. Maybe I could be the one who can save better than us combined, you know? So it's interesting. Like, I could touch upon everything that you said, you know, so. Thank you for sharing.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Anybody else? No. Oh, thank you.
My husband and I have two separate accounts, and we also have a joint shared account for necessities for home, things like that. And the reason why we have two separate accounts is because he never wanted me to tell him, don't buy that Range Rover. And I never wanted him to tell me, what? We have a Range Rover instead of a house? Okay, so I'm buying a house. But how, in your studies that you've done and women that you've spoken with, what have you found? Because we get a lot of attacks, quite honestly, from our friends and our loved ones about, you guys are crazy, you should be sharing everything equally, and he's wrong and you're wrong. It should all be pooled, and if he wants to buy the Range Rover, go ahead. And if you want to buy the house, go ahead. But it should never be only house expenses, one thing, and then everything else, you and him.
Yeah, nothing brings out judgment like money and what other people do with it, except children and what you do with your children. That's a different book. You know, women do all sorts of different things, but the one thing that every study will tell you is just to make sure that no matter what, if you're in a community property state, so it doesn't matter. You buy a house, it's his house too. You know, sorry, that's a headline there, but it does. And if he gets in debt, it's your debt too. That's the flip side of that. So it doesn't matter really if you do have separate accounts unless you create financial separate entities where you sign off on each other. That's your property and that's my property. And that's like it's a post-nuptial agreement. There's no right or wrong. There's no one way that works better. It's completely individual. It has a lot to do with the incomes of the two partners. So, you know, the one thing is that, you know, you're not anybody else's business. And be careful of who you talk to about money, because it's like a Rorschach test. It brings out people's own insecurities. So they'll tell you that you're crazy probably because they're afraid that they've put theirs together and misery loves company and they're in exactly the same boat you are. Hi. You can't believe how many people do that. And they close everything and they put it all together. But I will say that one of the scariest trends are you know, there was a new study that came out from Red Book recently about how many women are coming out of college and expecting not to work and just be supported by their husbands. And these are educated women, and it was 40+% of women said that they wanted to do this. And this is a scary bit of business because they're not taking care of themselves. Well, I think, yeah.
It's actually a question for you. What was your spending like before, when your husband was the one who had the power over the money, and now that you're making more money?
There's a great story behind this.
So how has your spending changed, if it has changed?
I was rather high up in publishing, and I made a lot of money. And then I got reorganized, as happens in publishing, and lost my job. And I woke up one morning and I realized that my husband's birthday was coming, and I wanted to have a picture painted of him and our son. And I went over to his billfold while he was shaving in the bathroom and stole 20 bucks and put it in the toe of my sneaker. And I repeated this act for, I think, 10 days until I had enough money to buy the painting. I was in my 30s stealing money from my husband. That's how my spending was when I was with my husband, because I didn't want his veto power, but I didn't want to consult him, but I didn't have any of my own money. So every time I would put something on the Visa card, I would feel nervous that he had the power to criticize me. And as a matter of fact, there was just a big front page New York Times piece, and it talked about this thing that about half women do in this country, which is they pay for things in cash and put a little bit of on the credit card and the rest of it in cash, because husbands don't monitor the cash, they monitor the credit card bills. Now that I make more money, and we collectively make a decimal point of what we used to make before, I don't spend as much. I'm much cheaper on myself. I still overspend on my family. And it's a very female thing. I will see a sweatshirt. My daughter has more sweatshirts than the Gap. But if I see a sweatshirt that I think she'll like, I will buy it. And I have to be careful, because what message am I sending her? I am her textbook. What message am I sending my children about my financial behavior?
I learned fairly early on in life, I think it was my mother who taught me this. She sold her engagement ring. And I remember, and my parents were married, she sold it because she was uncomfortable having a big rock on her finger. And she said, I want to have the money in the bank account to buy something that I want. My grandparents were scandalized. And I learned, I was about 11 at the time, that money gives you independence. And as a woman later in life, this affected my relationship with my partner, because each of us being independent financially means that we make choices for emotional reasons together and not because of dependency. And I think that taking ownership of your money and seeing the salary negotiation and the decisions over how you invest is really something that gives you independence and gives you more possibility in your life.
That's the goal. That's it in a nutshell, beautifully framed and beautifully put. And I only wish that there were more women like that, because I am 51. Most of my friends are like the statistics where 60% of baby boomers have 10,000 or less in their 401k. That's, I can't retire on $10,000, no less make a reasonable decision. Hi. Right next to you.
Not wanting to go to work is coming from?
It's coming from the culture. You're looking at a culture that is, one of the things that's happened is the American dream used to be the middle class, and I do write about this in the book, and that meant a good school for your kid, a safe home, a nice car, sort of being on par. You look to the left, you look to the right, you wanted to be sort of in your social group. What's happened is there are now 7 billion credit cards every month sent out. And women, when women started going to the workforce en masse, credit cards accompanied them. And the debt got exponential, the personal debt. I'm not talking about mortgage debt at this point. And what that debt allowed people to do was sample luxury. Mm-hmm. And people stopped being comfortable with just an average amount of things and started developing these luxurious tastes for, I'm sorry, but somebody has to tell me why a pair of sandals with a 5-inch heel that you can't walk in is $400. Mm-hmm. I still don't understand that, but I have bunions. But, you know, the culture, the phones the kids have, this and that. So girls are getting these messages about clothing. The kids are targeted with branding from the minute, you know, they can open their eyeballs. And the equation of luxury goods and life and being taken care of and the progressive infantilization of girls, where there was one man who gave his daughter $75,000 that I interviewed, and he said, now she can be independent. And I'm thinking, I don't think you've got that right. You know, there's this long adolescence combined with this luxury good where women are looking to these guys to take care of them and give them big rocks, and a diamond is forever. And it is throughout the culture. Just open any women's magazine or any teen magazine, and it is there, and it's scary. That's what I do in my day job. That's why I do Common Sense Media. Because if girls can't, and boys for this matter, they're equally tyrannized, can't learn to parse what messages they're being given with every kiss begins with K, or, you know, the latest phone that does everything including your laundry or whatever that you can buy on your credit card that you get when you walk through the threshold of the college that you go to, so that you walk out of college with debt. These kids are dead in the water. So they're going back to this 1950s. Who wouldn't want to be taken care of and drive a Range Rover and have a 5-carat pink diamond? Your mother.
That equates with the story I read about in a magazine as well when I was in the dentist. That basically that situation, it was like a sob story from the man's point of view, because he'd met his partner at Harvard or Yale or somewhere, and that kind of pattern, you know, they'd had a kid and she just wanted to stay home now and like totally, but still have the manicures and go to all the classes, and
right.
And it was like a very stressful relationship.
She's married, you know, we still in this society value men for the money they make, and, you know, because that means they can be taken care of. It's so politically incorrect to say this, but unless we say it and call out, maybe not the people in this room, but we all know somebody who's like that, you know, and say, hey, wake up. You know, this is really a fantasy. And besides, it feels good to touch every part of your life. Hi.
What I see mostly from my friends who are married and have kids is that the women are working. And now they're stressed out about the kids in daycare, and they're still working at home and working in the workforce. And so it's like they've gained all of this responsibility because they are working outside of the home, but they're still having to do everything at home too. And they're not getting as much help from their spouses as they would like, and so they're stressed out. And so I don't see where women are gaining that. I mean, they're working, but they're working a lot.
Yeah. Well, I wrote a whole book on this. You know, we've failed. We have failed miserably. We failed parents, not just women. We failed men as fathers because we're telling them we're going to value you by how much money you bring in. Therefore, you have to work all the time and climb your way up the food chain in your employment. We fail women by saying you have to do the same thing and then raise children. And then we have these parents who have made, you know, a lot of women who are not working, who had jobs, who now have made their children their jobs. So they're setting an unrealistic standard. My son goes to school with 7th graders who have never taken a public bus in the city. This is not healthy for our children, but this is their job and they don't want to let go of their job. So people have not solved this situation by any means. But if you're really square, and I'll tie this back to money, that's why I talked about trading time for money and learning to value who we are and broaden our definition of success beyond our net pay, our stock options, our perfectly groomed children. On the other hand, you know, there is no happy medium, but there are happy compromises, and they can be made, but they involve both men and women. You can't have the women. Nothing. Gloria Steinem said in when I interviewed her for my last book, she said nothing is going to change until the men change, and that's true, and they are changing. I'm seeing that. Look, you're smiling.
So I'll admit it, I'm one of those people that chose my husband partially because he's financially stable. He has a great job, he's a smart guy. And what that enables us to do is to be partners in the marriage. I have a great job and I'm a smart girl and we can be partners. So that means if I want to take 2 years off, I can. And likewise, if he wants to take 2 years off, he can. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't think there's anything wrong with making a decision like that and choosing someone you have something in common with as long as you're upfront about it.
The subordinate clause trumps as long as you're upfront about it. You know, one of the things I never want to do is judge somebody's decision. Somebody, you know, you marry who you marry or you don't marry who you don't marry, and you work, you don't work, you're raised, you know, but you gotta be aware of watch the money. You gotta be aware of the money. If you decide what's best for you and your family is that you're not gonna work anymore, you still gotta be a financial entity. You've still got to put a price on your time and your efforts and be aware and have it be part of the dialogue and the nature of the contract between you and your spouse. Because if you don't do that, you end up like me, assuming a whole bunch of stuff. And what does my son always tell me? Assume. That makes an ass out of you and me. I hate that. But, you know, I assume you did your homework. That's it. As long as you're upfront about it. And because women don't want to talk about money, because it's threatening, they fear it will threaten an employer or a spouse or a parent. Wait till you get to the point where your parents get old and they start talking about your will and you go, oh, no, 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 don't talk about that. You're going to live forever. You know, forget it. My father's 84. Talk about your will. What, you know, I don't want to fight with everybody in the family. What's going on? I can't bring myself to say it because I don't want him to think I'm reducing our relationship down to a financial entity. But there is a way to do that judiciously.
Liz says that she'll sign books.
Well,
So,
thank you, everybody.
thank you very much for coming.